effect of Miller and Sessions' messaging was to enthusiastically push a narrative that now dominates the Trump administration, that refugees and other immigrants steal Americans' jobs, suck up too much welfare money, incubate terrorists in their communities, and overall are a big problem. The conclusion was always the same. The government should let in far fewer refugees, and it should think twice about welcoming Muslims. And now, that's exactly what Trump is doing. For instance, in one Dear Colleague letter that Sessions co-authored with conservative Republican David Bratt, a letter Miller blasted out to the press list, the would-be Attorney General ripped into the refugee program. Quote, from this letter, "There can be no higher duty as lawmakers than to keep our constituents and their families safe," Bratt and Sessions wrote. "Yet our reckless refugee programs, lax green card and visa policies, utter failure to enforce rampant visa overstays, along with our wide-open southern border, put the U.S. at grave and needless risk." Grave and needless risk. It's a view that clearly informs Trump's decision to temporarily ban refugees. And a Miller press release blasted out on November 25th, 2015, included this ominous title: U.S. issued 680,000 green cards to migrants from Muslim nations over the last 5 years. Sessions then forwarded that email to his email list on January 12, 2016, the day of Obama's final State of the Union address, and he added this note, quote, "Some numerical context for any discussions of refugee policy that may arise tonight. As further context, the top sending country for migrants are Iraq and Pakistan, according to Pew, quote, nearly all Muslims in Afghanistan, 99%, and most in Iraq, 91%, and Pakistan, 84%, support Sharia law as official law." The implication was clear as a bell. Muslim immigrants are flooding into the U.S. and they're bringing Sharia with them. Someone who agreed with Miller's assessment would do just what Trump did. Just about any time a refugee living in the U.S. was charged, implicated, or otherwise connected to terrorism, Miller emailed his list about it. Another Sessions press release, sent jointly with Senator Richard Shelby, also included ominous intonations about refugees and Muslims. Quote, "Congress must cancel the president's blank refugee check and put Congress back in charge of the program," Sessions and Shelby said. Quote, "We cannot allow the president to unilaterally decide how many refugees he wishes to admit, nor continue to force taxpayers to pick up the tab for tens of billions of unpaid for welfare and entitlement costs." Quote, "The omnibus," still quoting the letter from Senator Shelby and Sessions, "would put the U.S. on a path to approve admission for hundreds of thousands of migrants from a broad range of countries with jihadist movements over the next 12 months, on top of all the other autopilot annual immigration, absent language to reduce the numbers," this release continued. That same statement also suggested that refugees were robbing elderly Americans of their benefits. Quote, from the statement, "Refugees are entitled to access all major welfare programs, and they can also draw benefits directly from the Medicare and Social Security disability and retirement trust funds, taking those funds straight from the pockets of American retirees who paid into these troubled funds all their lives," Sessions and Shelby said. Now that Trump is president, those numbers are getting reduced, and fast. Another foreboding subject line from Miller showed up in reporters' inboxes on November 20th, 2015. ICYMI. Each 5 years, U.S. issuing more new green cards to migrants from Muslim nations, the population of Washington, D.C. Sessions also took to the Senate floor to argue that Muslim immigrants are uniquely dangerous. On November 19, 2015, the Alabamans said the following about Muslims, quote, "It is an unpleasant but unavoidable fact that bringing in a large, unassimilated flow of migrants from the Muslim world creates the conditions possible for radicalization and extremism to take hold." In the speech, Sessions argued that the U.S. should set up safe zones in Syria where refugees could settle instead of allowing any of them into the United States. Miller emailed reporters as Sessions spoke to highlight his argument. Now, it's Trump's position. At Breitbart, Julia Hahn covered Sessions' speech in an article headlined, "Afghanistan Migration Surging into America. 99% support Sharia law." News broke earlier this week that Hahn got a job in the White House as an assistant to Trump and senior advisor, Stephen Bannon. And on and on and on for hundreds of emails without even a whisper of flip-flopping. Trump's crackdown on Muslims and refugees shouldn't surprise anyone. He's just taking his advisor's advice. Trump's executive order sparked protests and resistance all across the nation. People across the country and around the world are standing up to say that it contradicts our core values and that it violates the law. Massachusetts is on the front lines of challenging this illegal and downright offensive executive order. Last week, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey joined a federal lawsuit to challenge that executive order, and this is what she said. I'm quoting Attorney General Healey. "Harm to our institutions, our citizens, and our businesses is harm to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The President's executive order is a threat to our Constitution. Rather than protecting our national security, it stigmatizes those who would lawfully emigrate to our state. With this policy, our global universities, hospitals, businesses, and startups, and far too many students and residents have been put at risk. On behalf of the Commonwealth, my office is challenging the immigration ban to hold this administration accountable for its un-American, discriminatory, and reckless decision-making." In 2013, Senator Sessions voted against reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, a bill that expanded the protections and services provided to victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. There's a piece from the Bedford Minuteman that really tells the story of how sexual violence impacts Massachusetts. And this is what it said. "They are mothers, daughters, sisters, fathers, sons, and brothers."
Mr. President.
They are...
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
The senators impugn the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama as warned by the chair. Senator Warren, quote, said Senator Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens. I call the senator to order under the provisions of Rule 19.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate. I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
Mr. President, I appeal the ruling of the chair, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
That the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate, I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
Mr. President, I appeal the ruling of the chair, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
We will make America great again.